Welcome to the Daughters of the American Revolution Champoeg Museum School Tour Program. This program was started a number of years ago in order to fulfill two of the mission statements of the National Association Daughters of the American Revolution. In order to do that, we put together programs involving two of the Oregon State Society's museums. The Robert Newell House Museum Complex, which includes the Butteville Academy, a country school, and the Pioneer Mothers Memorial Cabin. We have about 1,700 school kids that come through this program each and every year, learning about Oregon history with our main focus on fourth grade education. We also have about 20 to 30 volunteers who come here to docent every year and help to share their expertise with the students and have a good time with them. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the view.
Go ahead and have a seat right here. Don't be afraid. Go ahead and scoot up. And group 3, if you could stay right here. Well, welcome to the Pioneer Mothers Museum. I want to introduce myself. My name is Miss Carrie. I want to tell you a little bit of history about this cabin. It was built in 1931 by the Daughters of the American Revolution. And these ladies wanted to honor our pioneer mothers by building this romantic replica of a log home. Can anybody tell me what a replica is? Yes?
It's kind of like a twin of the other one, so it's basically like a leather version.
Good answer. Now on the wall I have a picture over here of what a real log home looked like back then, and it would have been very rustic. It would have been half the size of this cabin, and you probably would have been sitting on a dirt floor and not have that nice windows like you see right now. So what I want to do, the rest of our time here today will be spent in going to 3 different stations.
I'm Mrs. Kiefer, and we're going to talk about the pioneers and the cooking and the food that they ate and how they made it. It took Mom almost all day probably cooking. Now, how many of you make bread at home? What's the first thing you do?
I get all the ingredients and
Mix them together, and that's what they did. But today we can go down to the store and buy some yeast. Then they didn't have any. So they'd mix flour and salt and a little sugar, and they would get a sourdough starter. Smell this. What do you think? Not bad? It smells like sourdough bread, huh? Well, it's alive, and that's the funny thing about it. It has to be kept warm or it'll go bad. So very often in the wintertime, they would wrap it in a towel and they put it under the covers, under the foot of the bed to keep it warm. Now, how would you like to sleep with some sourdough all the time? Then they would have to bake it. Now, we have timers now, but then they didn't. So they'd have to make up a way to know how long to bake it. And you know, pioneers sang a lot, and they would sing a song. And depending upon what it was that they were cooking, they'd know how many verses to sing, so that they know that the bread would be done just in time. So we're going to work with the bread a little bit like they would have done. Well, we've mixed up some dough, and it's all ready to bake. But we have to do one more thing. Who can tell me what we have to do?
we have to knead it.
We have to knead it. So we're going to divide this bread and take turns. Why don't the two of you start? I'll divide it in half, and you can see what it's like to work this bread. And the reason we have to do this is so that it'll be nice and light. Okay? Why don't you come around here? Okay, we're going to put some flour on the board so that it doesn't stick. Spread the flour around. You want to spread that out so that it won't stick to the board. Good job. And then it would have gone into the Dutch oven, which is here. And after it baked in the fireplace, we'd have French bread.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and we are going to be working with wool today. Where do we get our wool?
From sheep.
Sheep, that's right. And how do we get the wool from the sheep?
With shears.
You would shear it, and in the old days they would shear with these things like this. Can you imagine kids your age shearing sheep with a thing like this? Today, how do we get the wool from the sheep? Electric shears, that's right. And your purpose of carding the wool is to clean the wool. You would take it from the sheep, you would work with it with these. This was what you would have used in the 1840s by carding the wool. I don't let you use these because these are quite old. Instead, you would be using the dog combs, which act the same way. All of you will get a set of these to work with carding the wool. Go one direction, don't change it, because we want to straighten. The purpose is cleaning this wool and straightening the fiber. The churro wool is one of the best long fibered wool to work with. Once you have worked with the wool for a little bit to card the wool, you would put it in a basket, and your mother or older sister would have spun the wool on a spinning wheel, a walking wheel such as we have, or with a drop spindle, which is what they most likely would have used, because you could have carried this in a very small place. You would work with it by turning and feeding the wool that you have carded onto the drop spindle. And if you were really professional at this, you'd have a nice, long, beautiful piece of wool to work with. What would we make with the wool once it is spun and once it is in yarn? What's that purpose? To make the yarn to make what? Fabric, and make clothes, hats, gloves, and the wool would have a natural lanolin in it that would repel the water. And that's why it was so wonderful.
Well, today we are going to wash clothes the way the pioneers would have washed clothes. And there was no running water, was there? So where would they have gotten the water, do you think?
The river.
The river, yes. And would they have heated it?
Yeah.
And how would they have heated it? Did they build a fire? Do you think they washed the clothes just in water, or did they have something else? Do you think they went to the store and got soap?
No.
So if they didn't go to the store to get soap, would they have, do you think they might have made the soap?
Yeah.
Fat. There were two ingredients in the soap, fat and the ashes. And so they would usually use pig fat. And they'd put it in a colander, and when the rain came, the rain would wash through, and it would make something called lye soap. How many of you have heard of lye soap? And do you think it was really strong? Yeah, okay. Well, let's try it, huh? Would you take one? Why would you do the whites first? Yeah, maybe. I think that looks like it might be clean.
Come in. Boys will sit on the fireplace side, girls on the window side. Good morning and welcome to the Butteville Academy. My name is Miss Elliott and I'll be your teacher today. The Butteville Academy was built in 1859 and originally sat in the town of Butteville, which is about 3 miles east of here. It was moved to the museum complex in 1959 by the Daughters of the American Revolution, along with a little white building out there. Did you see that building? It's the jail, the Butteville Jail, which was built in 1848. Both of these buildings sat side by side, just like you see them today, so that when you went out on your lunch break, you might even be able to see if we had any prisoners there overnight. Now, I am the only teacher in the town of Butteville, and I would have taught all of the children from 1st through 8th grades. If you guys have any younger brothers or sisters, they would be here in class with you. Now, as you were coming through the door, you might have noticed that we have another half to our school. Did anyone notice what was over there? Emily. There's a bed over there. So what do you think we might have used that room for? It's got a bed in it. Any guesses? Louisa?
If someone gets sick.
If someone gets sick, people could get sick over there. Emily? Emily?
Yes, ma'am. That's where the teachers.
That is correct. That is called our teacherage, and that is where I lived. Some schools would use a church or other small building without a teacherage attached to it. So along with the teacher's salary of $300 a year, the school board had to provide her with room and board. She might have to stay with one of you, to live with one of you for an entire school year, or she might go from student's home to student's home throughout the year. She would sleep up in the loft with you and your brothers and sisters, or if you had a very large family or a very small home, she might even have to sleep out in the barn with the animals. Wouldn't it be fun to have your teacher live with you? Well, in my classroom, I'm going to pick on Ezra up here in the front since he looks kind of quiet today. If Ezra were talking when he shouldn't be talking, and if I tap my stick on his desk, will that get his attention? It needs to, because if he doesn't, he might find this across his backside. And you'll notice that you have a slate. Instead of paper, most of our schoolwork would have been done on a slate like this one. Paper in 1863 is very expensive, so instead of chalk, we would have used a slate like the one I'm holding and a slate pencil. You can see on my slate, I've written my name, and it looks a lot, I can write much more information on the slate than I can with chalk. It's not as messy, and most of our practice work would have been done on our slate. Now today I'm going to have everyone work out loud.
Yes, ma'am. What number do we go to? Like 1 plus 10?
Well, go ahead, try and fill up your whole slate. Just keep working until I tell you to stop. I will tell you to stop pretty soon, okay? Go ahead and start working. Make sure you're saying the problems out loud as you write them so that I can hear you as I go through the classroom. Good? Good?
Do you guys want to go ahead and pick out a button? And we'll make something called buzzsaw.
I know. My brother used to have one.
They're fun. String. And you're going to put the string through both of the holes so it kind of looks like a necklace. All right, so when you're done with that, it should look something like this. Very good. Okay, and then after you have it through both of the holes, you're going to do a sewing knot. You're going to take the strings, wrap them around your finger, making a loop, and pull them through the loop like that, and pull them like that. So now you have 2 loops. Put them one on either finger, then you spin it until it's tight around your fingers. Then you pull your hands apart, move them in and out. The reason they call this a buzzsaw is actually because of the humming noise. There. There you go. There you go. Very good, you got it.
Okay, we're gonna make some journals today. And who can tell me why would we, if we were pioneers, make a journal? Anyone? Any ideas? Yeah.
So we could keep a record of what happened.
Good. Can you think of any famous people that have kept journals? Yeah. Laura Ingalls. Very good, and she was pioneer times. Very good. Can you think of 2 famous explorers? Lewis and Clark, very good. So we're gonna make some journals today. What we're gonna do is we're gonna each take a quill. So I'm gonna pass this around and take a quill. And this is what they use to write with. And who can tell me what this is called? Yeah.
Ink.
Ink. And where did we get ink? If you were a pioneer, where would you have gotten your ink?
From making it.
You would make it, and what would you make it out of?
Berries.
Berries, very good. Or fancy, you would get ink at the trading post for Hudson's Bay. I think it'd be fun to make some of the ink. Crush up some berries. we were seeing new things, what would we write about? Yeah. And how would you write about them? Describe what it was like.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Judy and I'm going to be your guide today. Today we're going to learn a little bit about this house and a little bit about the man who lived here. First of all, I'm going to tell you about our house. It was built in 1852 by Robert and Rebecca Newell, and in 1952 it was obtained by the Daughters of the American Revolution. I think you've already learned a little bit about the Daughters of the American Revolution, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, when they got the house, it had sat empty for 20 years. And what do we usually get a lot of in Oregon? Rain, a lot of rain in Oregon. And what happens to a house that maybe has no roofing left on it? And there's a lot of rain in Oregon, what happens? Oh. The house floods, and what happens when a house floods? It starts to rot. And what happens when a house rots? You can't live in it, and it does something else. It falls over. That's what happened to this house. This whole end of the house started to cave in. So the only thing they could do to it was to take it apart board by board and map out a blueprint and rebuild it from the ground up. Well, in the process, they kept all of the interior doors. Most of the exterior doors and windows are original to the house. They even kept portions of the fireplace. So when you're walking around, be sure and look at the fireplace and see which bricks look old versus the newer ones, okay? They even scraped down to the original wallpaper in the house. They found out the wallpaper in the parlor, that room you came through, originally came from London, England. They found out that the manufacturer was still in business 100 years later and still had the original template or pattern of that wallpaper in the stockroom. So what you guys see in that room in there is exactly as it would have been 160 years ago. Okay, so on this level of the house, we have everything decorated in 1860s period style, with everything in here being donated by Oregon pioneer families. When you guys go upstairs, you're going to find an Indian artifact room, a handcrafted quilt collection, a small gun collection, and many of the dresses worn by Oregon's first ladies dating to the 1850s. So now who can tell me anything about the man who lived here, about Robert Newell? Anybody? He built this house. That's right. That's what I was looking for. So when spring came, Robert decided he needed to go back over and get his wagon so he could use it to haul logs to build a better house before the next winter comes in. So he goes all the way back over to Fort Walla Walla, which is over 200 miles away. He takes the wagon apart. He lays it out on an oilcloth on top of a raft he built out of small logs. He ties it up tightly, and then he puts it in the Columbia River. He floats it all the way down the Columbia River to the Willamette and then pulls it up the Willamette to Oregon City. It's the very first wagon that has gone across the plains, over the mountains, and into the Willamette Valley, even though it didn't look too much like a wagon when it got here. He started off in Tualatin Plains, then in 1842 he moves his family to Oregon City. In 1843 he's one of the 52 men who stood down here by the Hudson's Bay warehouse on the Willamette and voted for organized government. That started his political career. He became one of the committee of 9 that would frame the laws for the new government. Then he served on the provisional, territorial, and state legislatures later on. He's the only one we know of that served on all 4 forms of early government. In 1847, the Whitman Massacre occurred, and Robert Newell was asked to be one of 3 peace commissioners to go over to Fort Walla Walla in the Whitman Mission and talk to the tribes and see if he could bring about peace. He gave a speech to the Nez Perce tribe, and he convinced them to stay out of the Cayuse Wars, which saved a lot of lives on both sides. He comes back here, it's late 1848, early 1849. What's happening in California? Anybody? Everybody. Gold rush. Did he stay here, or did he head south to find gold? Excellent. He went down south to find gold, and he came back with enough gold dust to build a mercantile in the town, a flour mill on Champoeg Creek, and then this house on the hill in 1852. So wander around. Maybe some of you can go into the parlor, some of you into the kitchen, and some of you around here, okay? Okay. Okay, we're going to make candles. We dip the candle, remember, like that, and then we drip, and then we come over here and cool it off. And would they have used a pot like this back in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s? You think so? Did they have one of these things coming out of their
Was it
pot?
electric or-
Yeah, no, they would have used a great big iron pot. And would they have just used one stick at a time?
No.
What would they have done?
At time.
They would have had a whole great big stick, and they might have had 20 on them at one time, and that would have been your job, and you may have had to make 300 or 400 a year. So would you like that job? It's fun to do one, but what do you think about making 300 or 400 a year? You guys have one more dip here, maybe two, and then I'm going to trim them for you, because would you be able to stand them up with that point on them? No, okay. So go ahead and take one more dip and then cool them off and then hand them to me. Okay, when you're done, hand them to me. Okay, great, thank you. Oh, that's all right. Here. So we cut this off and we put this part back in, so that flattens it off so that you're able to stand it up, okay? Hold on to it with the wick, because otherwise it'll break on you, and we don't want that to happen. There you go.
That'll just melt.
It'll just melt and go back into the pot for the next candle, okay?
Raise your hand if you had fun today. All right, good. Raise your hand if you learned something new. Good, I like to see that. I wrote a song to a popular tune to say goodbye to you, and hopefully you enjoyed your time here today. And this is my song to you. If you know the tune to this, you can sing this with me. Here it goes. Thank you for coming here today. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Don't forget the pioneer. She came to settle the wild frontier. So thank you for coming today, and I hope you had a wonderful time.